Hey everyone, we're back! And with a bit of a new format. You'll see what I mean after the title card.
We're going to go over how you can use terrain effectively to shoot and not get shot in response. The nerdy way to say this is non-reciprocal shooting.
Or, as my orky brain understands it, size matters. Base size, that is. And, here we are. Hi. New format.
Woo!
Yeah, long story short, we know we've been on a bit of a hiatus, having some hobby and hangs, but not doing a lot of these fun nitty-gritty Tactica videos that we really enjoyed. And a lot of that has to do with, I really don't like editing these videos, I'll be honest. So, go ahead.
It's all good. It's all good. It's fine.
So we're trying a new format. Let us know in the comments if this works, if it doesn't work, if we should put bags over our heads. Well, don't say that in the comments. I'll just ignore it and go cry.
We are far too pretty to put bags over our heads.
Oh, you the prettiest girl at the dance. But I digress. Here we're gonna talk about something pretty neat. There's a lot of math on the screen at first glance, but it's honestly not that complicated. And a lot of the math, I think, is really neat what you discovered because of how it led to a very cool shorthand that lets you know what opportunities exist and what things are never a possibility with setting up non-reciprocal shooting. And this is something that you kind of found out and you've been using for a while since the drop of the edition, right?
Yeah, so this whole video, this whole concept is keyed off of using or abusing, depending on how you want to look at it, the concept of obscuring in the new version of Kill Team. Old version of Kill Team, the rules were if you could see someone, they could see you. It was always 100% reciprocal. The way obscuring works now, that is not true. It's very clearly meant to more or less be true that someone should always be able to shoot you back, but that's not actually the way the rules work. And so if you have a good grasp of obscuring, this whole thing is to explain how to use it. And I figured this out. Let me
TLDR the obscuring real quick for anyone who is still a little fuzzy on that. If you're still learning the rules and you still need some help with line of sight, which is honestly the chunkiest part of the rulebook, check out our video on line of sight. We'll put it up there. Over Alex's head, you'll see a card.
Yay!
For that video. It's helpful to break down and explain with examples what the book does pretty well at explaining cover lines and all that kind of stuff. But the most important part of being able to shoot someone that you need to understand for this is that I can kind of use the mouse to kind of key it over here. Say that the operative on the left wants to shoot the operative on the right. They draw cover lines, which is essentially a cone, more or less, of lines from any part of their base. And they have to, all these cover lines, an infinite number of lines, cross over the other operative's base. And for obscuring, if any of those lines intersect a piece of terrain, which for all these diagrams is just going to be this triangle at the bottom, this is a piece of heavy terrain that has obscuring. If any of those lines cross over the heavy terrain and your target is more than 2 inches away, they're obscured and you can't shoot them no matter what. Well, not no matter what. Your hunter clade could do something about that, but unless under the rule, unless you can ignore obscuring, you can't shoot them. So it's at 2 inches from where the cover line intersects, so on the shooter side of the cover, not on the target side of the cover, and that's highlighted a little bit later, right?
Yeah. And with regards to Omnispecs, don't hate the player, hate the game.
Hey, at least I got grenades.
Yeah. That hurts. That hurts.
So, so what are we looking at here?
So we're looking at just our very intro diagram for this. So like Emmanuel said, he explained the cones. So you've got the guy on the left and the guy on the right. They're both trying to shoot each other. In this situation, they've both just barely cleared that obscuring
this corner. Yeah.
So both of them are using, in order to establish their line of sight cones, both of them are using the zone that's colored in purple. One guy's using the zone that's colored blue. One guy's using the zone colored red.
There's purple?
Yeah. Oh, look, he's an orc, everyone. He can't see purple.
So this lad shoots faster, and this one's got the lucky.
Yes, that's precisely how the rules of this game work.
Okay, I got it. So we're done.
Nice.
I got it.
We're done.
Okay,
Here.
great.
No.
Well, let's. I think the next slide also shows helps out with this because if that terrain ever pokes into that purple, so if it ever pokes into the purple over here, no one gets to shoot anyone, right?
Yeah. And I think anyone who's played a couple games and has a basic understanding of obscuring, you intuitively understand this. We're not blowing your minds yet.
Yes. And then also the other intuitive part of it is if you can peek around a terrain, but your opponent can't peek around that same terrain at you, that is the entire concept of non-reciprocal shooting when it comes to using terrain and obscuring, right?
Right. So those red and blue zones in those line of sight cones from the first slide.
Yeah.
If you poke into if the terrain pokes into one of those but not the purple, that's when all of a sudden one operative can shoot his target, but the target has no visibility, or not visibility, we can't use that term, has no line of sight back to them.
Correct. So if you ever poke into either of those cones, and I think you have another one,
Yeah.
So any situation that you poke into either of these cones that's not the shared cone, one person can shoot, the other one cannot. And this obviously assumes a static situation, right? One person's moving in to shoot and the other person's just static there, whether they've already gone or whatever's happening, right? So this assumes some sort of static situation, obviously not always the case. Yeah. Now, I think the most important part of this to point out before we move on is that the distance that both of these models, where they can barely both clear the heavy terrain, is the same. And why is that, Alex?
And the reason that distance is the same is because these are two equal-sized bases. And this is where the cool proportions and math from this comes in. So equal-sized bases, that vertex, that tipping point where if it shifts any further left or right towards one or the other, then one person becomes obscured, the other isn't. For equal-sized bases, that is exactly halfway between them.
Yep.
That's the magic point.
And the way that you can use this is that if you're a 32 millimeter base, like a Space Marine going up to shoot a rocket boy, right? Both of them are on 32 millimeter bases. Then if that rocket boy is 4 inches away from a terrain, then you would both be able to shoot each other roughly at 4 inches, a 1-to-1 proportion, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so let's get to the cool part. So what happens when the bases are different sized?
So what happens when the bases are different sizes is it's now no longer are you who's closer necessarily. It now, their tipping point is a proportion of the base sizes to each other. So in this case, we've got 25 millimeter on the left, 32 millimeter on the right. And you can actually see I've set up the distances here to where the distance to the tipping point is 2.5 inches for the 25 millimeter and 3.2 inches for the 32. So it should be pretty clear that this is very much in proportion to the base size.
And the part of all of this that blew my mind when you were just, you had your Doc Brown, like, great Scott! It's like shaking me down. It's like, look at what I've discovered! Was how close is this to perfect proportion between the three base sizes that we generally see?
Yeah. So we're going to hand wave for a moment and pretend that a 25 millimeter base is actually a 24 millimeter base. Now all the base sizes are divisible by 8. So our base sizes exist in a proportion of 3 to 4 to 5.
Okay. Now explain that like I'm an orc.
Custody big, beaky, medium, guardsman small?
Well, what I'm trying to say is that all divisible by a 3 to 4 to 5 ratio, what that means is that when you have, if you have a 25 millimeter base, think 3. If there's a 32, think 4. If there's a 40, think 5. A little bit of this breaks down with these 28 millimeter bases that we're seeing, especially with Corsairs. But once you understand the 3 to 4 to 5, you can help fudge the numbers for that edge case between the 32 and 25. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you can handle the ratio of 28/40 in your head, then you don't even have to bother with those. But the 3-4-5 is the shortcut, because I'm not even excited about doing that math.
Yeah. So the math, initially, you got super nerded out on the math until you realize that it's just simple proportions, right?
Yeah. So, okay. So rewinding just a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So whoever is closer relative to this tipping point to their base is the one who can shoot without being shot back. So in this case, if the 25 millimeter chokes up to the right a little bit, still stays, outside of 2 inches to make sure obscuring works.
So this guy moves closer. Yeah.
He'll be blocked.
He'll be
And
safe.
he can shoot.
He'll be
Yes.
safe. He's blocked to return fire, is what you mean, right?
Right, yes, exactly.
Yep.
And then conversely, if the 32 millimeter chokes up from their current position on screen, now he's safe from return fire, but can shoot the 25 safely.
Mm-hmm. So the closer a model can get while staying outside of 2 inches, obviously, the better a chance they have at shooting without being shot. And we intuitively know this, right?
Yes.
This is, again, not blowing people's minds, but the 3 to 4 to 5 ratio is the most important part, right?
Right.
Let's spoil that now. We've been teasing it for
Yeah. So, all right. So let's have an example of where a 25 millimeter base is trying to shoot a 32 millimeter base.
Okay. So you have a guardsman trying to shoot an orc boy.
Yep. Sounds great. And let's say that orc boy is 6 inches away from the corner.
Mm-hmm.
So now you can use this ratio to on the fly figure out how close you need to be to that corner in order to shoot him without him shooting you back.
Mm-hmm. And that's, remember, you're a 25 millimeter base, so remember 3, shooting at a 32 millimeter base. Remember 4. And then the next thing you need to check is the distance your target is from that heavy terrain that you're trying to clip, which is 6. So now stop me if I'm wrong. Hopefully I don't mislead our watchers right now. But you take that 6, you multiply it by 3, then you divide it by 4. So that gets you to 4.5, right? So 6 times 3, 18 divided by 4, 4.5. So that means the 25 millimeter base, the guardsman, needs to get between 4.5 to 2 inches, because you can't get closer than 2 inches. So within 4.5 of that terrain in order to set up non-reciprocal shooting. Outside of 4.5, they cannot do it, correct?
Correct. And even worse, the orcs probably might have it set up on you.
That's true. That's true, because you would fall into their sweet spot. So
yes.
So why is this so important, right? We've just given you a bunch of math to tell you that you could do something you already knew how to do. Well, if you do this quick math in your head, you know, number 1, if it's possible. Number 2, if it's not possible. So you can, instead of, setting something down by your model, then trying to move it, scooting it around, saying, oh, can you see, can I check in the cover lines, all that kind of stuff, wasting 5, sometimes even longer minutes on a tournament or just in a casual game where you're just trying to have fun and spending all this time trying to figure out if you can even set it up. You know definitively if it's possible or not based on just one static measurement for a model that's not moving. That's 6 inches. You just do the quick math and do I have enough movement to get within 4.5 of that vertex, of that heavy terrain? Yes or no? Done. You know if it's even possible.
Yep. And with that, and if both you and your opponent understand this, a lot of it, it's one of those things where if you're playing by intent in a tournament at a high level, both of you understand this concept. You're like, hey, you're 6 inches here. I'm 25 to your 32. I have more than enough movement to get to this point, to get this non-reciprocal shooting set up. I'm going to place him here. We both eyeball it. That's about right. And then you're done.
Yep, absolutely. So share this with everyone so that way everyone can learn it. Spread the good word. But let's look at some more examples now that we've shown that, right?
Yeah.
So this is an example where this is essentially with just different numbers, what we just talked about, right?
Yep. So yeah, the orc boy on the right is, we'll say, 4.5 inches ish away, somewhere between 4.5 and 5. And if we multiply that by 3/4, we take that to 14-ish, and we divide that by 4. So that takes us to 3 and a fraction.
Yep.
Yeah. And you look on the left, and the guardsman is well within 3.5. He's at 2.5. And sure enough, he's blocked from being shot by the orc boy, but he's got full line of sight on him.
Yep.
In reverse.
And then the opposite situation. Let's do the math differently. So you have 4.5 for the guardsman. So we're doing the inverse. The guardsman is the target, and you got a Daka boy trying to get within 6 inches over here.
So
right?
yeah, when you're figuring out that fraction, the ratio, the magic number of the shooter is always going to be on top.
Yes.
So in this case, it would be 4/3.
Yes.
Since the orc boy is shooting.
Yeah. So we got a 4 over here, a 3 over here for our magic ratio. This guardsman is at 4.5 roughly.
Yeah.
That is at 4 inches roughly. So 4 times 4, 16 divided by 3, which is just shy of 6, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, just shy of 6. Obviously, we've set up an exaggerated situation, but that then shows what we all intuitively know, right? For the guardsmen, they had to get real close. They had to choke up on that point in order to set up the non-reciprocal shooting. But we already intuitively knew that a 32 millimeter base or bigger base has an easier time peeking, like getting a toe around the corner and keeping a toe within the corner. But the math just, obviously proves it.
Right.
But doing the math, even though we know it's going to be easier, lets you know if you can get within 6 inches of that point to even bother setting it up, right?
Yeah, exactly. Can you actually go back a slide?
I can.
Thank you, sir. So if you look at that, look how tiny, it's just, that corner is just barely poking into the wedge to make the guardsman safe. Understanding this, in a game makes it much easier to explain that, yeah, we both know this can happen, but, if you're trying to do this in a game, trying to say, no, this tiny little corner means I can shoot you, but you can't shoot me. I don't think it's even undefensibly so, could be upset if you just don't understand these concepts well. But if you go down to the next one, the one we were just on, I don't think there's no confusion there. That wedge is well and obviously into that cone.
Yeah, and I think it's a lot easier for larger bases to even prove this non-reciprocal shooting, so the math really does help out the 25 millimeter bases. Kind of makes sense now that you proved all this math with your plasma cavalier just to make sure that you could get away with this nonsense, right?
Yep.
Alrighty, so now here's the fun stuff, right?
Yeah, so now we've gone to the extreme, 25 versus 40.
So
and
the magic numbers now... Yeah. The magic numbers now are 3 and 5, right?
Yep. And once again, just to prove the ratio, I've set it up now. The 25 millimeter is, again, 2.5 from the vertex, and the 40 millimeter is 4.0 from the vertex. As close as I could get it.
Perfect. Yep. Yeah, 4.0-ish, 25-ish, based on those.
Yep.
So now with the 25 millimeter being the target, right?
Yep.
So being the target, you have the 4.5, and then within what the 40 millimeter is going to need. Just to figure out what the 40 millimeter would need, you would multiply the 4.5 times 5, which is 22.
4.5. Wait. Yes.
22,
yes.
And then divided by 3, which is just over 7, right? So clearly, obviously, an exaggerated example just to prove it, but anywhere between 2 and 7 inches from that terrain, the custodian can set it up, right?
Yeah, and now that I'm looking at this, I'm actually going. I'm remembering why I set this one up specifically.
Okay.
So if you look at that, these two are actually almost equidistant from the vertex.
Oh, right? No kidding. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, roughly around 4 inches.
Yeah, and if you had equal-sized bases, this would be a situation where they either both see each other or they both don't. But because they're equidistant and you have the asymmetrical base size, the larger base has the advantage here.
Yep. And then we see the inverse of that right here, how close
I think that's... Or yeah, it's the same. I think it's the same one.
Is it the same one? Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, they're both equidistant again.
Yeah.
And this is the inverse. There we go.
Right. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, how close that poor plasma cavalier or guardsman or whoever's on that 25 millimeter base getting to that custodian. No.
If he doesn't one shot him, he's about to get charged and have a very bad day.
Yeah. So TLDR this for me, bud.
TLDR. Any model can set up non-reciprocal shooting on any other model. It's just a matter of relative base sizes that determine where it's possible to set that up and how easy it is to set it up. And this as a tool is incredibly powerful.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, I think the tournament circuit's aware this exists. We're not taking anyone by surprise by saying this.
Sure.
At the beginning, though, I caught some very good players out by surprise by saying to someone, hey, my plasma is going to shoot your custodian, and you're not going to get to overwatch me back.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a surprise to them.
Mm-hmm.
But we talked it out, and they were like, oh yeah, absolutely, 100%.
Yeah. So it's less about teaching that actual scenario, and more now about just showing where you can do it and when it's even time to bother, right?
Yeah, the whole way you explained it earlier is just to be able to, at a glance, understand if you have the movement in order to set this up. Correct. Is huge. Mm-hmm. And to understand the zones on the board where you need to get your model to in order to make it happen. Correct.
So, in summary, just remember 3 to 4 to 5, right? 25s are 3s, 32s are 4s, and 40 millimeters are 5s, right? So if a 3's shooting at a 4, you multiply your opponent's distance by your number, so their distance by your 3 if you're 25, and then divide it by their number, and that's how close you need to be, right? And if you are, if you're a 28 millimeter base, or you're shooting at a 28 millimeter base, just do both maths and just find something roughly in the middle. That's close enough. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cool.
Or just don't play with 28 millimeters. Just saying, it's an option.
You're making me sad about my Corsairs. All right, bud. Thanks for showing all this, man. This is cool stuff.
No problem. I got to geek out. I'm happy.
Woo! Alrighty.
Woo!
Bye, Internet.
Bye, Internet.